Zoom has hundreds of millions of users, but Zoom is also censoring on behalf of China and promises to keep censoring. And that's just one of Zoom's many China problems. Welcome back to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. We are now in what feels like year 300 of the coronavirus quarantine. And I know I'm certainly going a little batty from all the self-isolation. What's that, Shelley? I don't actually have an earpiece and I've been talking to myself the whole time? Shelley says the darndest things. I'm sure it's not just me who's starved for human interaction. And that's where Zoom comes in. Zoom is an easy-to-use teleconferencing app. And the coronavirus has been a big boon for business. Zoom has said it now has more than 300 million daily participants, up from 10 million before the pandemic. You've probably used Zoom at some point over the last few months, either to attend online classes or online meetings, or if you're very unlucky, an online Zoom party. Zoom is an American company. Its founder, Eric Yuan, was born in China, but is now an American citizen. And he says Zoom's mission is to deliver happiness.
Our culture is to focus on delivering happiness to each other, deliver happiness to our customers.
That's great, as long as those customers don't do anything to make the Chinese Communist Party mad. Then, no happiness for you. Zoom has canceled the accounts of US-based activists who held online Tiananmen Square massacre vigils, as well as the account of a Hong Kong activist. Why? The Chinese Communist Party asked them to. Here's what Zoom said happened. In May and early June, we were notified by the Chinese government about 4 large public June 4th commemoration meetings on Zoom that were being publicized on social media, including meeting details. The Chinese government informed us that this activity is illegal in China and demanded that Zoom terminate the meetings and host accounts. And so Zoom did terminate the meetings and host accounts of 3 of the meetings because they had participants from China. One account that was suspended belonged to Zhou Fengsuo. Zhou Fengsuo lives in the US. His account was suspended just days after his Tiananmen event. We actually interviewed him about what happened on a recent episode of the China Unscripted podcast. Check it out. Another account belonged to Chinese democracy activist Wang Dan. His account was actually shut down while he was hosting a Tiananmen event, so the whole thing went offline. Wang Dan also lives in the US. Separately, Zoom also terminated an account belonging to a Hong Kong activist named Li Chuk-yan. It was shut down minutes before he was going to stream an interview with another Hong Kong protester. And again, Zoom did this because the Chinese Communist Party asked them to do it. That doesn't look like delivering happiness to me, unless Eric Yuan got happiness confused with censorship, an easy mistake to make. Eventually, after lots of embarrassing media coverage, Zoom reinstated their accounts and apologized, but not for what you'd think. First, they pulled the whole "don't be mad at us, we had to comply with local laws" move. That's been a common refrain for businesses who censor for China. In Zoom's case, it's a little unclear what local laws they're talking about, though. Zoom did say that the Chinese government told them it was illegal, but we don't know why. Because in China, there's technically no law against holding a Tiananmen Square massacre vigil. Plus, China's constitution technically guarantees free speech and press and assembly. But Zoom didn't shut down accounts in China. They shut down the accounts of people in the US and Hong Kong. So Zoom should have been complying with the local laws in those places, which not only guarantee free speech in their constitutions, but actually guarantee free speech, like for real. So the whole comply with local laws excuse is nonsense. But that's not what Zoom is apologizing for. Their actual apology is that we shut down the meetings instead of blocking the participants by country. Yeah, they're sorry they didn't just block users in China. But don't worry, Zoom is going to develop the technology to be able to block users in China. Hooray! You see, Zoom was one of the few holes in China's Great Firewall. That's the system the Chinese Communist Party uses to censor everything on the Chinese internet. But for a time, Zoom allowed people inside China a way to freely communicate with the outside world. And it was incredibly popular. Zoom's mobile program has been downloaded 5.4 million times from Apple's China store since January 1st. And it was particularly important for Chinese activists, who had things to say that could get them arrested if they used a Chinese-based platform like WeChat. Users in China include people and organizations from underground religious groups to women's rights activists. They see the service, Zoom, as a rare window to the rest of the world. Well, they did, but the Chinese Communist Party, with the compliance of Zoom, has been gradually closing that window. Last September, Zoom's services in China were briefly suspended. How did Zoom fix it? They made it so Chinese users could no longer host calls unless they made a registered account. According to China's cybersecurity law, registered accounts need to use real name registration for the service, a process that links Chinese internet users' identity to an account via their phone number. This way, Chinese authorities can find them. By the way, Zoom's new requirement came in response to a call from China's Ministry of Public Security. But Chinese users could still join international Zoom calls anonymously. In fact, Zhou Fengsuo, who hosted that Tiananmen vigil on Zoom, said there were 250 people on the call and as many as half may have dialed in from China. But now, Zoom will fix this hole in the Great Firewall. And I understand why. China has a huge market that Zoom wants to deliver happiness to. But it's more than just that. Many of its research and design personnel are in China, which it has said helps it keep costs low. In fact, ahead of its IPO last year, Zoom listed having engineers in China as one of their key profit drivers. Since they don't have to pay them as much as in the US, that means more profit for Zoom. Zoom also has big data centers in China. The Chinese Communist Party can access any data that goes through China, which shouldn't be a problem for us in America, because our data stays in, oh dear. Zoom's connection with China is why some people are very concerned about its security. Taiwan has banned government employees from using Zoom for official business. So have Google, NASA, and more. Zoom has also been sued by its shareholders for overstating its privacy standards and not disclosing its massive privacy and security flaws. The good news is, this dangerous problem has brought together Democrats and Republicans in the US. In April, a bipartisan group of 19 US lawmakers asked the FTC to investigate Zoom. And now, another group of bipartisan US lawmakers wants Zoom to clarify a few things. They have a list of 8 questions for Eric Yuan to clarify Zoom's relationship with the Chinese Communist Party. But one of those questions is a particularly dangerous trap. Does Zoom routinely share data with the PRC government, and if so, what kind of data does it share? The US government may already know the answer. Misleading the senators could pose legal jeopardy. And that's a kind of jeopardy I don't think Eric Yuan wants to play. So now, Zoom faces a choice between the US and China. As long as Zoom has employees and data centers in China, it will be beholden to the Chinese Communist Party. And that will increasingly undermine its business in the US and the rest of the world. But it's not just a problem with Zoom. US tech companies have been complicit with the Chinese regime for decades. After all, Cisco helped build China's Great Firewall because they thought it was a great chance to sell more routers. And they never learn. Like when Google tried to secretly develop the Dragonfly search engine for China, until their plans were leaked and then terminated after a huge backlash. But Google and its parent company Alphabet still have hundreds of millions of dollars invested in Chinese companies. So far, American tech companies have been able to walk a fine line between bowing to the Chinese Communist Party's demands and justifying their actions to the US government and the American people. But as the US and the rest of the world harden their stance against the Chinese Communist Party, companies like Zoom are going to have to make a choice. And now it's the time when I answer questions from you, my loyal 50-cent army, fans of the show who support what we do through the crowdfunding website Patreon. Greg asks, Chris, has or will the international banking community and or the World Trade Organization decide to either severely restrict or outright remove the People's Republic of China from participating in those organizations? Greg, money and investment from the West is pretty much the biggest reason the Chinese Communist Party is still in power. And sadly, I don't think it looks like the international banking community or the WTO is looking to change the status quo. HSBC and Standard Chartered have both publicly said they support China's national security law for Hong Kong. That's the one that will make criticizing the Chinese Communist Party illegal in Hong Kong. Wall Street is also heavily invested in China. And Greg, for the World Trade Organization, there's no precedent for any country being kicked out. Sure, China lost a landmark WTO dispute against the EU last week. China spent 4 years fighting for market economy status, a designation that would give it stronger footing with commercial partners while also curtailing their ability to retaliate over trade disputes. And they lost that fight. So here's what it boils down to. There are people making a lot of money in China. They don't want things to change. But if governments around the world actually realize the damage the Chinese Communist Party is doing and all stand up together, then there actually is a chance things may change. Thanks for your question, Greg. And for all of you watching, consider joining the China Uncensored 50-cent army. You'll have a chance to ask me questions on the show, and there are some other cool perks as well. Check out patreon.com/China Uncensored to learn more. And be sure to subscribe and check back every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday for new episodes, because YouTube isn't always sending out notifications about new episodes. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.